The proliferation of privilege worksheets, Illinois lawmakers sending state agents to spy on homeschoolers, and pro-life activism is now, get ready for it, white supremacy. Next on The Dr. Duke Show. Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Duke, and this is the aforesaid Dr. Duke's Show. Every week, Katie and I cover those stories impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses around the world. Greetings to our listeners, and if you haven't done so, please consider subscribing to the podcast on iTunes. It is absolutely free, and you will never miss an episode. Before we get started today, Katie, I want you to quickly identify for me 3 ways you're privileged to be my associate.
Oh my gosh. Always being at your beck and call, does that make me privileged? Maybe.
It depends on how well you do your job.
Oh, good point. How am I privileged? I'm not. That's the long and short of it. I am definitely not privileged to be your associate.
Well, don't tell that to the New York school system, because New York, and like many other states in the union, many other public school systems, are handing out privilege worksheets, Katie. We're going to have to do one for the Dr. Duke Show. All the ways Katie is privileged to sit next to me. But this one is for public school kids, young public school kids, high school kids, are being asked to rate their privilege. New York Public High Schools gave students this privilege reflection form. Sarasota Springs High School students scored their privilege based on a variety of factors. And the more affirmative answers you gave, the higher your point title rose. And the higher your point title, the more privileged you were. So, for example, kids have to take 25 points if they're white, 25 points if they're male, 20 points if they're straight. I wonder why the being straight gets 5 less points than being white and male. But right away, most kids, most typical boys are starting out at 65 points higher than everybody else.
I have absolutely no idea how they determined these points. They're completely arbitrary. And I took a look at what the worst categories are in terms of like what's going to be the most disprivileged, as they said. And the number one worst thing I guess you can be is blind. You get negative 750 points for that.
Yeah, it gets me about this is that you're right. It's utterly subjective. This is just a progressive utopian's idea of made-up numbers thrown at issues and things. It's not just, and one of the most serious ways you are disabled or you are in somehow unprivileged is to be a Muslim, right? Yep. So if you are a blind Muslim, if you're like the blind sheik who participated in the 9/11 attacks, if you're the blind sheik, you are the most underprivileged person in America.
Yeah, and if you want to talk about religion specifically, so Muslims at the very bottom, but the highest is Jewish. You get plus 25. You're the most privileged. A Christian gets a plus 5. So Jewish is 25, Christian 5, Muslim negative 50.
Are you telling me that progressive leftists who are educating our kids are quasi-anti-Semites? Are you, fainting couch. Is it not the most predictable thing in the world? How do you get to the point, by the way, being white and Jewish in America is worse than being white and Baptist? How does that function?
Yeah, who knows? And then under orientation, of course, this is also one of the worst points you can get is being trans is negative 500 points. But right before that, they say trans, passable. I don't understand what that means.
It seems to me is if you're a guy who thinks he's pretending he's a woman and you look kind of hot, like this is like Hilary Swank in that stupid movie. What was that one called?
When she shaved her head?
The one where the dude had a penis at the end of anyway, it was a while ago. So if you're a transsexual who actually looks female, right? Yeah. Then you're passable, which means you have an easier time than me simply sticking a blonde wig on and trying to hit on dudes in a local nightclub.
Yeah, it's insane. And then if you take a look, too, under the category of country, so they actually break Europe into groupings. So if you're from the top countries, you have the most privilege, and that's like the Netherlands and Scandinavian countries and such. The United States is plus 20, but way down at the bottom there, of course, Middle East. Negative 600 points, right. Of course.
And why is it, by the way, that if you come from Scandinavia as opposed to Spain, you get a lot more points taken on? And that's because the farther north you go in Europe, the whiter it is. That's all that it is, right? There's not a lot of swarthy Italians and Spaniards living in the frozen tundras of Sweden. And so this whole thing, it is a stereotype. It is a racist, paternalistic, bigoted stereotype of the worst kind of predictable liberal thinking projected on paper. Now they're quantifying their racial stereotypes.
Yeah, and one more, just because this gets me. It just shows exactly how poorly educated our own educators are. They actually have a note on here for the sheet that, student, if you completed this worksheet on a Friday or Saturday spelled with an E, of course, you get negative 15 points. So basically, if you stayed home on a Friday or Saturday night to do this worksheet, you're like not privileged as well.
Well,
How dare you?
You also have to measure your own attractiveness,
Yeah.
right? If you are an attractive person, you get more privilege points. If you're unattractive, you get less. And this is a catch-22, right?
Yeah.
Do you want to hoard the points, or do you want to admit your attractiveness level? And I love how retrograde some of the statements are. At one hand, you get a lot of points for being, and this is their word, not mine, you get a lot of points in the victim poll here for being, quote, retarded, unquote.
Yeah.
That's the word they use.
That is
if
it.
you are retarded, like the person who clearly wrote this, then you get more points. The word isn't. How do you use the word retarded? If you're, or blame Jews more than anybody else if you're a progressive liberal?
Yeah, everyone should take this and see just how privileged they are, because if you get just between 50 and 100 points, you're automatically in the privilege zone. And if you are less, if you get more or less than, I guess, negative 100, then you're in the very disprivileged.
Well, and look
category.
at the categories. Look at the categories for wealth. There is poor, middle class, affluent, rich, and then for the super rich, they actually use the term plutocrat. Plutocrats. You couldn't come up with Montgomery Burns-ish or something like that? This is such, again, there's no way to look at this. First of all, it's insulting.
Yes.
It's insulting, number one. And number two, this is a kind of emotional abuse of children. What you're telling kids, so you're trying to box them in, you're trying to make them feel bad, or you're trying to make them compete to determine who's the biggest victim, right? You're trying to put in the heads of our kids that the more pathetic you are, the more helpless you are, the more we can categorize you along these lines, the more sympathy we should have for you, and the more attention should be paid to you, and the more perks that we should give you. This is literally mainstreaming failure.
Yeah. I'm going to give you one guess, and one guess alone, as to how the school district responded when it was brought to the attention on a Facebook page by a mom saying, our students are getting this. How did the school respond?
Oh gosh, in one sentence?
One guess.
Your kids belong to us, screw you, we're going to keep doing it.
In essence, yes, that's what they did.
Good. Paraphrased.
Yeah, they said in a school board meeting that the principal said they wouldn't discuss why or how the activity was used or how the school is going to work to ensure that this doesn't happen again. Of course, because, we don't actually.
Right.
care.
So in other words, thanks for bringing this to our attention. It's none of your business. We're going to do what we want to do, and maybe we'll get back to you.
That's the best
That's
summation
exactly
of that.
right.
All right, well, let's head to Illinois, where we have lawmakers now basically trying to make it so that they're going to send agencies into every home of our parents who homeschool. So a bill was introduced by Representative Monica Bristow. She's a Democrat, and she says this new bill would allow government agents to investigate homes of every homeschooling family in the state. It's called HB 3560, and it was introduced and then it was tabled last week, but it's clearly alive and well.
And listen to that language. This is not sending agents of the schools in to check on the progress of your kids, which is a huge intrusion and unconstitutional violation of parents' rights over their kids' own schooling. But the word they used is investigate. We are assuming that homeschool moms and dads are doing things that they shouldn't do. We are assuming that homeschool moms and dads are failing their children and mistreating them. So we will treat homeschooling now as oppositional, if not borderline criminal, and we're going to send agents into your homes to investigate. And I promise you, when they come to your homes, they're not going to sit in on a lesson when you're teaching your kid a Shakespeare play. They're going to be nosing around what's in the refrigerator. What are you feeding these kids? They're going to be looking under the kids' beds. They're going to be looking at the kind of video games they play. They're going to look at your kid's wardrobe. They're going to go into mom and dad's bedroom and see if there's a gun cabinet there.
And they say as much in the bill,
Yep.
in the exact language. This is from the bill. It says, after a homeschooling registration form is submitted, so you must submit one of these forms, the State Board of Education must request a Child Protective Services unit of the Department of Children and Family Services to investigate the home in which the homeschooling will occur to ensure there is no suspected child abuse or neglect in the home. And they're the ones defining child abuse and neglect in the home.
Here's what gets me. You want to talk about all the ways that American public schools have failed. They are not teaching our kids to read. They are not teaching our kids to do math at a literate level. They are not preparing our kids for college. They are sociologizing our kids and psychologically evaluating our students without a degree in any of those areas. They are teaching our kids radical sexuality without asking our permission anymore. The schools are not able to protect protect our kids from shooters, and they won't protect our kids from shooters. They won't arm teachers. They won't hire armed security guards to roam the halls because they don't want that. They can't protect your kids from being bullied or for committing suicide or for experimenting with drugs. Where is Child Protective Services investigating them? Why is not every public school in this country at every grade level have a child protective service protection agent sitting there watching and documenting the clinical, gross, unequivocal abuse and neglect that our kids get in public schools? You're going to send them into the one form of schooling in this country that actually seems to work if, testing and academic achievement is what you're measuring. You're going to send them there, not into the typical public school classroom.
Yeah, and then after they go in and they do their investigation, they're going to take that report and they're going to notify the school district in which your home is located so that the school district can be notified as to, we might get a new student coming in soon because based on whatever that report says. And the thing is, Illinois, I took a look at their nation report card to see where they rank because realistically, all the states just are awful. And Illinois overall as a state had only 32% of their 8th graders being proficient in math and only 36% of them were proficient in English.
I'll bet when it comes to surveying, if you were to do a survey of the intellectual and educational skills and accomplishments of homeschool kids, I'll bet you they're all over 70%.
Absolutely.
I'll bet you, or 75%. In terms of reading, math, and all those areas, I bet you the homeschool kids are more than double the proficiency. But these are the kids who have to be spied on.
Absolutely.
Because here's the thing. Dysfunction and failure is the new norm in government schools. We see dysfunction as just all the more reason to ask for more federal money. The more we fail your kids, the more we socialize your kids and sexualize them, the more money we're going to need from you taxpayers for birth control and abortion and Planned Parenthood to come in and give lectures to our teachers. And the more we fail your kids in terms of their education, the more even everyone's going to be. Let's get rid of those nasty high achievers who know how to read and write, and let's play lowest common denominator politics with our kids. This is the attitude of the public schools. The norm is failure and inefficiency. And if you are a mom who is very efficient and wants to make sure your kid knows something, don't you see that by definition you have to be the problem?
Yeah. Well, this sounds like a great topic for debate. You could debate homeschooling versus public schooling. But if you go to George Washington University, you can only debate that if you're a woman or a trans person, because they said that in the upcoming April debate hosted by George Washington University's Parliamentary Debate Society, they are only allowing women and transgenders to compete. Now, this is part of the George Washington University is part of the American Parliamentary Debate Association, and this is the first time in the organization's history they're going to do this. And they needed to get all of the schools, at least 2/3 of the schools had to be in favor, and they said, sure. Women only and transgenders only.
Yeah,
sorry, man.
This makes perfect sense given how social justice has dominated universities. The bottom line is debates used to be about allowing the best debater to win, right? It was about making the best case, and it was kind of a neat system because you'd be thrown a question. You couldn't even pick what side of a question you were on, right? You had to think on your feet. You might be asked at a debate to debate something on the side that you disagree with, but you had to be able to do that. Debates are actually fairly political neutral because you never know which side you're going to be on, and may the best debater win. And of course, when that happens, you have to, according to social justice mores now, you can't have white men debating insensitive positions, right? So what if I'm a white guy, and the question that's thrown out there, I'm a white kid, and the question thrown out there is Donald Trump Hitler or not, right? And you give me the white guy the no, he's not. And then you compel 2 transgender kids to have to debate how Donald Trump is the best president we've ever had. And so what you're doing here is now, debate is not about competition because competition is bad. Debate is not about success or the ability to prove your point because it's the only points worth proving are progressive points, right? So what this is now is allowing transgenders and women to debate. And I guarantee you what the topics are going to be. Every single topic and every single side of each topic is going to promote progressivism, right? And simply because you couldn't ask those kids to do anything else. You can't ask a woman to debate toxic femininity. You only can talk about how men are evil when you debate those points.
Well, we always talk about empathy and being able to look at the world from someone else's viewpoint. And debate is an absolute perfect environment for them to do this. So if you love Donald Trump and you're told you have to say that Donald Trump is Hitler, wow, that's going to put you in a whole different perspective, and you're going to learn something from it, whatever side you get put on. And of course, we can't have that. We can't have our students actually think. That's the main point of this, is we can't have them critically think and reason through something because, oh my gosh, they might stumble on the truth.
Well, it's not just about critical thinking. You're absolutely right about that. It's not, we can't even expose kids to arguments they don't like. We can't ask kids in the name of a debate to make arguments that go against their progressive values, and we can't expose kids to arguments that are made either by people who are fashionably low on the score here for privilege, yeah. Right? We can't ask, having white Christian heterosexual males debate anything, right, is going to be a problem. We saw this a couple weeks ago, where a high school debating group, group of debating kids were disqualified because they were white men, and they cited Jordan Peterson as one of their sources for one of the arguments. And the response of the girls on the other side was, "You offended us."
Well, and the judge even
and the
said,
judge said that.
Racist.
Yeah, right. The girl said, you cited Jordan Peterson as an expert. He's a college professor, for God's sake, and a professional psychologist. You cited Jordan Peterson. We're triggered. And then the debate moderator says, you're racist for citing Jordan Peterson, and they awarded the girls the victory. Right? So this, given where we are right now, this is the most predictable thing in the world. But please don't call it debating anymore. Yeah. This is let's call it an affirmation. We're all going to get together as women and trans, and instead of debating, we're going to affirm. We're going to affirm everything. We're going to affirm each other. This is what happens when you put women and men who think they're women in charge of intellectual things, right? Oh, it's got to be, I'm surprised the word debate stands. Debate. It's a contentious term. It pits people against each other. Again, let's call it an affirmation and begin and end each affirmation with a hug. Unless that hug is not wanted, right? Well, a hug with suitable distance between them, right?
Hug.
There you go, air hugs.
Just like that. But there is a caveat to this. It says that women and anyone who does not identify as cis male is going to be welcome to compete. In registration, there's going to be no questions asked. So you could, lie like all of them are going to be doing to themselves.
Like everything else.
Like everything else.
Like everything else, right? You can lie about your gender. You can lie about being a Native American. You can lie about anything. And so it's not even an affirmation. It's my opinion based on my own truth. So y'all get in a room, nobody challenges anybody, nobody even challenges the registration. I could show up in a wife beater with my chest hair on display and stuff a sock down my pants and then pretend I'm female, insist that I'm a 16-year-old petite little girl, and if you call me on that, but you're not going to because we don't got to check we're not going to check the registrations, right? So this whole thing is made up. Yeah. The whole thing is made up. It's pure fantasy island. Get tattoo, right? The debate. Get tattoo there and have Mr. Rourke be the one who oversees this fake debate. It's unicorns debating dwarfs, right? It's hippopotamuses and purple gingers, right? What is going on here? I don't know purple gingers. But debate it, affirm it, hug it.
Absolutely.
Hug it out.
Hug it out. Air hug. All right, well, let's talk about Notre Dame, because Notre Dame, the once Catholic university that makes everyone weep now, we have professors there saying that anyone who is part of the pro-life movement is being fueled by white supremacy. Yeah. Somehow, some way. So they had an event where they showed a propaganda film called Reversing Roe. And this was an event sponsored by the Irish for Reproductive Health. It's a student group, the Gender Studies program of Notre Dame, and the St. Mary's Department of Gender and Women's Studies. Obviously, just by that alone, you know how this is going to happen. But we had various faculty put some statements out there that I can't even believe are real. But nonetheless, we have Diane Pinderhughes, who's a professor of political science. She says, abortion is an issue that allows for an effort to control the place of women. Those who push so aggressively for continued reproduction without any controls, are those who are also more likely to be in support of making sure the country stays predominantly, overwhelmingly white.
And what's her evidence for this?
She's a political science professor.
Oh, well.
There it is.
Well, she's a political science professor, and she said so, right?
Absolutely.
Notre Dame, how come you're never in the news for a traditional Catholic debate about marriage between a man and a woman? How come we never hear from Notre Dame about a seminar held by traditional Catholics at Notre Dame why homosexuality is a biblical sin? Why is it, Notre Dame, that we never hear from you anything that has anything to do with a traditional Roman Catholic opinion about anything? It's always this, right? And this is what Christian and Catholic universities have done. We bought the lie, right? We wanted to show, as Christian schools, how diverse we were, how accepting we were in the name of Christ. You're an anti-Christian? Let's give you a deanship, right? Oh, you don't believe in God? Let's make you the chair of our English department. And lo and behold, what happened? After decades of bringing in all of these non-Catholics, because heaven forbid at a Catholic school, we have people who actually believe in Catholicism. That would seem to be an educational problem. We're not diverse enough. And guess what now? These people from within are completely deconstructing every aspect of Christian existence and Christian intellectuality for this kind of stuff. Again, when you have the most pro-abortion president in the history of the world, Barack Obama, the guy who refused to sign a petition or a potential legislation in 2007 that would have mandated care for babies that were born alive of botched abortions, he didn't do it. And what happens when you do this, Notre Dame? When you give a platform to a guy like Obama to talk about these kind of things, here you are 10 years later, and you got the governor of the state of New York, a so-called Catholic, who passes basically an infanticide law. You've got all of these Catholics, people like Biden and Pelosi now, right, who are arguing, who will not vote to defend the life of a child that's born alive, even at 9 months old.
Yeah, or after. We have another comment that I want to put out there because it just makes my blood boil. Pam Butler, she's the assistant director of the Gender Studies program. Shocker, her statement's going to be awful. She said, abortion got politicized in a moment of a white supremacist strategy of the right wing of the Republican Party to mobilize a very specific set of evangelical Christians in the United States as a base. Pam Butler, do you understand what you just said, and do you understand where you are working at the time? She's like, there's no connect between them and what their values are because they don't have any values.
Listen to the argument. So it's not about the life of a child. Nobody, she's basically saying nobody, not even these evangelical hicks who are too stupid to know they're being used by the Republican Party, nobody actually believes there's a problem with abortion. But this was the way the evil GOP decided to maintain its power hold, right? They were going to convince gullible and uneducated rednecks from the South that abortion's murder and babies, and Cletus down there in Alabama believes it. And that's the whole purpose of this. And why did they really do it? The GOP, not because, A, they were losing vote. All their votes were going to progressive Democrats who murder babies, because that's what the world wants. And we want to be able to murder babies at any point in a woman's pregnancy, and even after the pregnancy. So if it weren't for a very small, she even points out, it's a very small, very targeted group of evangelical voters. These are the ones now that have swollen the GOP ranks and are driving the GOP to pro-life positions. It's the stupidest thing I've ever heard, and it's the kind of thing that should discount you as an academic. A bunch of clucking hens sitting around at Notre Dame under the aegis of the Roman Catholic Church, griping about this kind of stuff without any real evidence for any of it. It's just all made-up garbage, but does it really matter? Does it really matter when you have a Notre Dame administration who keeps hiring these people, who keeps sponsoring this stuff, and who never, ever, ever, Notre Dame, sponsors the other side of it? Right?
That's a very good point.
Where, again, I ask, where is it? Where do we hear traditional Catholics at Notre Dame having forums like this? Because if you did, I guarantee you, if you had a bunch of Catholic Notre Dame students and a few Notre Dame faculty who wanted to push this, right, to oppose this, I guarantee you, Father Jenkins at Notre Dame would come out and call them provocateurs and uncivil and uncollegial if you tried to do that.
Yeah, there was a response from this specific event, and then we actually do have one sort of positive story coming from a Notre Dame alum. But the response from this by a man named Ryan Baumberger. He's a pro-life educator, and in this instance, because we're talking about white supremacy, it should be noted that he is black. He said, rabidly pro-abortion Notre Dame professors calling pro-lifers racist for tireless efforts to protect mothers and their unborn children, regardless of race or ethnicity, is truly a Twilight Zone moment.
Yeah, you got a young black male Catholic, right, on campus is the only one that's speaking out about this. And in any other circumstance, his voice would be considered absolutely legitimate. It would be elevated, right, because of his minority experience. But in this case, right, the black male Catholic has been dubbed having more privilege than all of these tenured professors do.
Yeah, and he pointed out how that film that they watched, Reversing Roe, never even addressed the disproportionate numbers of African-American babies being aborted. Because exactly it is right. Disproportionate.
As an African-American male, he's pointing out genocide against black people, and this, again, group of clucking academic hens wants no part of it.
Absolutely.
You tell that black kid right, who recognize the toll that abortion has taken among black lives. You tell him that he's just a manipulated tool of the evangelical GOP.
Yeah, there's one more story about this. So we have actually a positive kind of, it doesn't go with this story, but it is another one from Notre Dame. We have a Notre Dame alum who graduated in 2009, and this is significant because it was the same year that Obama went to Notre Dame and gave that commencement address that had a lot of backlash from the Catholic community. The man's name is Charles Camosi, and basically due to Obama's position on abortion and what he said at that commencement address, Camosi said, and he's pretty much a Democrat. He said, I left that really difficult situation thinking that we need to find ways to overcome polarization because it was literally tearing the Catholic world at the time. This is a decade ago that he made this realization that even though I'm a Democrat, I'm pro-life, and we need to have people out there on the Democrat side be for life. It's okay to come out and do that. So he's now an associate professor of theological and social ethics at Fordham University, and he's a board member for the Democrats for Life of America. And this is pretty much, it's one of, if not the most pro-life advocacy group associated with the Democrat Party, which most people don't even maybe make that connection. But it's quite interesting that at the same time you have these professors at Notre Dame spewing all this hate and talking about white supremacy and abortion, you actually have an alum who maybe learned something while at Notre Dame, and there's a positive coming out of it.
Yeah, he's an alum. And here's the problem I have is that, we're seeing how across their platforms, the National Democrat Party is cutting ties with any Democrats who are pro-life. Already at the Democrat marches that you see in Washington and other places, they won't allow pro-life Democrats to be part of the Democrat platform. Mr. Camosi can, all he wants, argue that there should be room on the left or a room on the Democrat side for pro-life, but don't tell us the only university you graduated from doesn't seem to have a lot of room for life. You expect the Democrat Party to have it? Why would the Democrat Party be more enlightened about abortion than Notre Dame is when Notre Dame allows this stuff to go on unchallenged?
Yeah, and it's just, he said, the reason why so many of us stay and fight is kind of addressing why would you be on the Democrat side when clearly they're being handed over to the abortionists. The reason why many of us stay and fight is because we don't want to give the party over to the extremists. We see now very clearly what happens when you turn one party over to abortion rights extremists. We'll see what happens with it.
And extremist is the thing, right? I mean, again, there's no room on the progressive left for somebody who thinks like Camosi feels. So here's the thing. There's really no room for his worldview at Notre Dame. And there's really no room for his view in the Democrat Party. I guess the question I would ask Mr. Camosi is, why are you a Democrat, number one? And number two, why are you not condemning Notre Dame for what they're saying? I mean, maybe it's the Democrat in him, right? Maybe he's a bit Pollyannish on this. Despite the fact that my so-called Catholic university has turned its back on reproductive rights for children, and the fact that my party wants nothing to do with me or anybody who thinks like I am, you ask the question, what are you doing as a Democrat, Mr. Camosi?
Absolutely. All right, so talk to me a little bit about what is happening over in the UK.
And the garbage that happens in English schools, at English universities, British universities, it's going to get here, right? It's just a matter of time. There's no really bad, stupid idea that Europeans come up with that Americans 20 years after the fact just can't wait, progressives can't wait to enact. Here's a really disgusting one. It's a frustrating one. So you have girls now, young girls in Britain, who are actually getting out of having to go to unisex bathrooms because they're getting harassed, right, by going to the loo with boys. These girls who are on their periods they're feeling self-conscious. They're claiming harassment on the part of boys because they're on their periods. And so now and who could have foreseen this coming, Katie, right? How in the world could you have foreseen this coming? So now progressive activists, guess what they want to do? What? They want to get rid of the word unisex. They don't want to fix the problem. They still are going to insist on putting girls and boys in the same bathrooms. But they're going to change the name. We're not going to call them unisex bathrooms anymore because unisex is offensive to transgender people, right? We're not going to deal with the actual harassment these girls are facing. We're not going to give them their own safe spaces in the name of feminism. And again, what use is feminism if it's not protecting women and girls from the unwanted presence of males? If it doesn't do that, it has no purpose other than to fund money to Planned Parenthood to murder little girls, and no other purpose for it. And yet the response of the British schools is remarkable. we're going to change the name of these schools. Because if we call them unisex, right, what about somebody who identifies with both sexes? I mean, so every crisis, every contradiction, every hypocrisy that comes from these unthought out liberal policies is an occasion for more radical leftist tinkering with language.
Yeah, and they call unisex, they're saying it's such an uncomfortable and outdated word. But if you have little girls who are so scared and ashamed to go to the bathroom, and it's not even just when they're on their period. Now it's become a thing. One mother described how her daughter wouldn't even drink any water out of the well, we call it a bubbler, but they wouldn't drink any water because then they would have to go to the bathroom, and then, oh my gosh, the boys are going to do that. That's a health issue then. It becomes more than, what an uncomfortable word. How about uncomfortable and pretty much could be very scary in terms of their health and what would happen to them. That's where we're at in the UK.
Yeah, and there is one feminist group in England. It's called the Women's Voices for Wales. And they say that not Wales with an H, by the way.
Yeah, Wales.
Women's Voices from the Welsh. The safety and dignity of girls is being neglected. Well, duh, right? The safety and dignity of girls. You're getting involved now, Welsh ladies, but where were you 5 years ago when this whole thing started, 10 years ago when the whole thing started? When you start forcing boys into girls' bathrooms for no good reason, other than to placate the feelings of a very small group of people who have gender dysphoria and who need treatment. This is what you do. Where were those feminist voices 3, 5, 10 years ago when this began? And how many feminist organizations, how many feminist all-girls colleges now are allowing in men because they think they're girls or women, right? And how are we handling it, feminists? You have feminists defending the fact that biological males are competing in all the women's sports now, girls' sports. You had a male sprinter now who thought he was a woman, set all new records in track and field, right?
Two of them. First and second.
That's right. Yeah. And all these women's records for all the different sports that they play in high school are falling to men who think they're women or are pretending to be women. Where are the feminists on that? And heaven help you if you're Martina Navratilova, a lesbian and a feminist who came out and condemned this, and now all sorts of feminist groups and trans groups are disassociating ourselves from Martina. So Martina Navratilova, who is actually quite a big-mouthed, annoying advocate for lesbian rights, right? Now she dares to stand up to the transgender lobby, and the gays and the lesbians and the transgenders now are severing ties from her. And so if Martina, the tennis player, Martina Navratilova, is being banished from her worldview when she is as close to being a man as you're going to get, in terms of her athletic prowess, and she is an open lesbian, and she is an advocate for feminist causes, if she isn't orthodox enough, do you think these poor menstruating middle schoolers in England are going to get any relief from this? Don't bet on it. If anything, they're going to force the boys to start putting tampons in their boxer briefs as a way to get them to sympathize with and participate in the menstrual cycle themselves, right? Maybe that's how you stop the harassment, right? Because they're already putting in American colleges, right? They're already putting tampon machines in boys' bathrooms in American universities. Because, men have periods too, Katie.
No.
Do I look bloated?
Or do you feel bloated?
I need some chocolate.
Well.
Why do you hate me? Oh, I'm sorry, honey. Chocolate! Why do you hate me?
I don't like chocolate, so, I don't have any chocolate to
cramps.
Give you. Cramps?
Cramps.
I would like to see you with cramps for like one day. I'd be fascinated.
You have no idea what it's like to be a menstruating man. I can only swim 3 weeks out of the month.
Ooh.
It's horrible. You think about this, right? I mean, I get up every day, and my cycle wreaks havoc with my hair. I can't get it to lay the way I want. Are you looking at me like I don't have hair?
I'm looking at you like
How dare you marginalize my experience? I have a thick coif of Elvis hair.
Yes.
But now when I'm menstruating, can't you see how limp it is?
I bet it
limp
is limp.
The operative word.
It's time for a little extra credit sponsored this week by those Belgian comics who created The Smurfs. We have some great news for the Smurfs, as their very own Papa Smurf, at the Bernie Sanders age of 100, was elected to the college council at Williams College with a staggering 9 write-in votes, which, I kid you not, is more than 3 actual students who are running for a spot. Immediately, Papa Smurf put forth a resolution on blue democracy, and this is real, I'm not joking here, which had a higher tone and quality than the Green New Deal, but was rejected, much like the Green New Deal will be. Unlike AOC, Papa Smurf is the lone Smurf to not wear white because he's an independent thinker.
So Papa Smurf, who is masculine, bare-chested, with a robust beard, is a more popular candidate than any of the trans minions that could have gotten that position.
From Blue to Black History Month, a Virginia elementary school is apologizing for playing a slavery game. At Madison's Trust Elementary School in Brambleton, Virginia, the physical education classes of 3rd through 5th graders played a runaway slave game as part of Black History Month, where some students were slaves and others were slave owners. Now Principal David Stewart apologized for what happened, and students will learn the material again, along with the creation of an equity culturally responsive team. I'd say I was shocked, but that would be a lie.
So you teach a stupid and insulting lesson about slavery, and when you get caught and called on it, you're going to teach it again, just from a different perspective.
The college level is having issues with Black History Month too. We're now so woke that you can't celebrate with Southern food because it's racist. The University of Pennsylvania told food workers they were not allowed to celebrate Black History Month by cooking Southern food because the cuisine might offend students. Last year, there were many a backlash across the country of serving stereotypical dishes such as fried chicken and Kool-Aid. In this move, the university really showed it had no bone, either of the back or chicken variety.
So in other words, let's feed our American school kids only boring, bland American food, hamburgers and hot dogs, at which point the vegetarians are going to scream bloody murder, and then all the minorities are going to say, how come we as minorities have to eat white boy American food?
What's being served to students is also of debate at Cornell University, which just admitted that the school has been serving hamburgers with up to 1/3 being filled with ground-up mushrooms, calling themselves stealth in their actions because it's not clear if the students know about this. Cornell is boasting about upping the veggies in the burgers by collaborating with the Blended Burger Project. And now we can legitimately call all Cornell students and ask them, where's the beef? And are you on shrooms?
In the words of Dwight K. Schrute, Cornot.
And finally, for some good news, American school children can count their blessings because Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez told a Showtime program that if Donald Trump was not elected president, she may have been a school teacher. And I quote, "I could be just like teaching in high school right now." Like what would she teach? Underwater basket weaving? I mean, seriously, what could she be qualified to teach?
She's qualified to be a congresswoman, right? So, I mean, in some ways, she's perfectly qualified to be a high school teacher. She's shallow, she's political, she's entitled. Sign her up for the union, man. She could be the union boss right now.
And with that, make sure you head over to iTunes and subscribe to the Dr. Duke Show podcast. Leave us that coveted 5-star review. And don't forget to like our Freedom Project page on Facebook for daily articles and videos.
And that does it for us this week on the Dr. Duke Show. If you like what you heard, and even if you don't, share the podcast with your friends to annoy them at the least. For Freedom Project, I'm Dr. Duke, she's Katie, and we'll see you next time. And I want you to seriously, seriously work on your privilege.